thou shalt show all thy work. I mean, as we can see right here, they're totally saying that. But in conclusion, math rocks. I love math.
Multiple choice, circle the best answer. Question number 1, 7x minus 7. Here you just need to look for the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is 7. If you take a look at this student here, they try to add a b value, but you don't need to do that. This student did, I hope they can see that if you just, when you factor out the GCF, then you can just distribute 7 times x is 7x, 7 times 1 gives you a 7 to double check your answer. Factor completely. 3x cubed plus 3x squared plus x plus 1. You should recognize from your formula sheet that you have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if you have 4 terms there, then you just put it inside your box. So we did like a z. Now if you do the z, you'll type in, or write 3x cubed, 3x squared, x, and positive 1. And right there, you're just taking out, you put it inside and you're trying to figure out numbers on the outside. So the greatest common factor here is a 3x squared. The greatest common factor this direction is just an x. The greatest common factor here, you're thinking like, oh, they don't have anything in common. Remember, they have always a 1 in common. Same way this direction. So 3x squared plus 1 and x plus 1 is your answer there. And this student got the correct answer, showed the work. Take a look at this student. This student did the GCF twice. They took the greatest common factor of this one, which is x plus 1. Same thing over here. The greatest common factors of 1, and then the x plus 1 you take out, and then you just have 3x squared plus 1. Good job. Alright, this student, what did they do? Greatest common factor, that one works. That looked like a heart. It's meant to be a check. Greatest common factor, yes. 1, yes. And then right here, this is not the greatest common factor. That's the mistake. Because think about it. Remember, to check your answer is just x times x gives you x squared, not x. So this would have to be a 1. 1 times x gives you x. All right, question number 7. Solve x squared plus x plus 1. Okay, if you did the x method to factor to solve, you would get a times c is 1, b value is 1, and then there's two numbers to multiply. So therefore, this is prime. What does prime mean? Prime means that you cannot factor it. Okay, so if you can't factor it, what always works? The quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over a very long division sign over 2a. You did my substitutions here in parentheses. You have a negative sign, and my b value is 1 plus or minus, and then my b value was 1. B squared, 1 squared, negative 4. Your a value is in front of x squared, so that's 1, and then your c value is 1. Big fraction line all over 2 times a value is 1. And then you simplify this. 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. And then 1 minus 4 is negative 3. The factors of the square root of negative 3 is square root of negative 1 times square root of 3. The square root of negative 1 is I. There are no two identical numbers that multiply to equal 3, therefore it stays. So 2 acceptable answers. Negative 1 plus or minus I radical 3 over 2. Or if you separate it, you would get negative 1/2 plus or minus, and then I radical 3 over 2. So if you wrote just prime, I gave you 2 points. If you used the quadratic formula, I gave you 3. If you were super close, I gave you 3.5, 3.5, 3.75 based off of your answer. Let's take a look at some student work. All right, this student didn't have an eraser. It was like, come on. And they just wrote that. So they got 1 point because you can't, 1 plus 1 is not 1. So they scratched out prime. I would have given them 2 points if they did prime. I'm showing this one, no attempt on the problem, then I give you a blank, which is a 0. All right, let's look at this student. Okay, new is prime, that was good. Quadratic formula, looks good right here. Okay, then they stopped. Remember, what do pirates say? Pirates say I is square root of -1. So student didn't know that. All right, take a look at this student. Recognize those prime, went to the quadratic formula, wrote the quadratic formula down, and I don't know if you can spot the mistake right there. It should be -b. So that should have been -1. So I probably gave him a 3.75, but student recognized square root of -1 is I. That was really good. All right, this student recognized those prime with the quadratic formula correctly. Happy. Substitutions, looks good. Okay, look here. You had a fraction, and then they eliminated the fraction. It should be over 2. And then here, you don't need a square root, so it's -1 plus or minus. You don't put a square root there. And the last problem, number 8, factor completely. So, trinomial, 1, 2, 3. You should recognize half of 2 is 1. So you can use your Xbox. Long, it's difficult, but you can do it. Let's do it. Not too much. A times C is -99. B value is 30. I wrote out some factors here, and I realized, okay, this gives me a good visual. I need 2 numbers that multiply to be -99, but add to be 30. And so right here, you should recognize that, well, if I make one of those negative, if I make the 3 negative, those will add to be 30, and they multiply to be -99. Okay, because the A value is greater than 1, you must do the box. First term goes in the top left. The constant, the C value always goes to the bottom right, and then these 2 numbers here are splitting the middle term, so you add an x. So this would be 33x, and this one is going to be -3x. Greatest common factor, 3x, 3x, -1, and positive 11, 3x plus 11, 3x minus 1. This was your correct answer. Remember, the order does not matter. You can have 3x plus 11 and 3x minus 1. Some of you recognize that this was kind of big and hard, but if you looked at the first 2 terms, you can do it by chunking. And if you did it by chunking, it should look like this. Remember, your parentheses, your first 2 terms, your greatest common factor is 3x. And so my substitution is the box equals 3x. So what I put in the parentheses has to be exactly the same. Power of 2 is on the outside, so 3x times 3x gives us 9x squared, and 3x times 10 gives you 90x. The point of chunking method that I'm showing right here, what it does is it goes from an A value that was 9 to an A value that is now 1. So if my box equals 3x, I get box squared plus 10 box minus 11. A is 1, C is -11. My B value there is 10. 2 numbers that multiply to be -11 are 11 and -1. And those 2 numbers add together to be 10. So I have 11 and -1. And the great thing is I don't have to use a box because your A value is equal to 1. And then you substitute your box back in for 3x. And then you get the same answer as above. Alright, this student did it by X box method and did it correctly. There's the X and there's the box. Another student, X box method, good job. Alright, this student didn't read it correctly. They must have said solve. Remember, solve and factor are different things, but they chose to use quadratic formula to solve. That's not what I was looking for. Now, it is possible if you did solve for X, then put it back into X minus those parentheses, then you could have done it, but I'm not sure that student knew that based on the information they did here, because maybe they would have led me to that by having parentheses X minus. Oh man, this problem's screaming, get a calculator. Oh, this is a nice one. Chunking, good job. Most students who don't know what the answer is, they write prime incorrect. It's a 1 point. I think on this problem you had to, what did I write? If you got the x correct, I gave you 2 points. And then if you did the x in the box, then you get 3, 3.5, 3.75. So even if you just filled out this part, I would have given you 2 points, even though that's not all of it. All right, this student got a messy. Get an eraser. They got stuck on the x, so they did the chunking method, and they did that correctly. But they didn't know what to do after that. They didn't know what to do from here, nor do the substitution again. So I gave them 1. I just had to show you guys. Triangles! Awesome. The student did chunking method, and then they kind of left. They forgot what happened to the box. What is the box? And just had X. So you have to do a substitution back in. And last student example, they did the X. Whoa. 90 value. Not correct, but I wanted to show you the student was missing the box. That's what I wanted to show you.
I'm Mr. Eng's mom. Do your homework.